Okay. As I was saying, is in those days there was a tremendous mural movement fashioned after the muralist movement in Mexico, and all about social justice. And you can still see the murals throughout the community, and that's one of the agendas of the anti-gentrification movement as well. There was theater. Maria will talk about that more, but that was Teatro de los Barrios, and Compañía Trucha did a lot of street theater, community theater, educating the community. And there was also a women's organization, which still survives today, called Mujeres Latinas en Acción. And it translates kind of funny into English, but it's called Latin Women in Action. And people used to laugh about that. But at any rate, the founding convention was held at Centro de la Causa, where three of us of the Chicanas worked. And we were instrumental in bringing Gloria Fontanes, the vice chair of the Young Lords Party in New York. If people remember, the Young Lords Party was a Puerto Rican group a radical Puerto Rican group fashioned after the Black Panther Party. And when we brought them to Centro, and of our students in the Right to Read program and other students of ours were so excited and agreed with the politics that Gloria was espousing. And I really realized that they weren't so radical, but it was the things that our people want and need. But basically, I want to say, to me, my opinion is that the struggle that aroused the most passion and energy was the struggle around education. And there was a reason for that. It was basically in the 1970s, the community was mainly Mexicano, and there had not been any amnesty program until 1985. So basically, most people were undocumented. And it was the mothers, the Mexicana Latina mothers, who propelled the education movement on so many fronts, because they realized that it was only through education that their children would have a chance for equality and a better life than they were leading. But at any rate, the big issue that occurred was the Benito Juarez struggle. It was a 5-year struggle led by two groups, the Mexicana Latina mothers and the Chicano movement. And the Chicano movement, what did we want? We wanted a true education. We wanted our language taught, because many of us second and third generation did not know Spanish that well. We wanted our true history and culture taught. And after a 5-year struggle, we won. And so when a community struggles so hard, I do not want to give up on it. You know, we deserve better, and we deserve the fight. And that's why I'm so involved right now today. I want to talk about two particular struggles that I was particularly involved in, and I was kind of the center in a certain way. But I began in 1978 working at a local grammar school in the neighborhood, the Komensky School, and it was a couple of blocks from my house. And my son was in El Hogar de Niño, a daycare center around the corner. And when I joined the school, I was teaching ESL, English as a second language. The parents at the school, the mothers in particular, had already begun a fight for a new addition to the building. Why? Because in those days, in the 1960s and 70s, the Board of Education did not build new schools in minority neighborhoods. Instead, they brought in the trailers, these mobile things, and they were filled with where children should be having their recess. There was no place for recess because we had these mobile units, which were faulty plumbing, faulty water, faulty lighting, cold. You know, they were really bad, and the parents did not want that for their children. The parents were fighting, and I supported the parents when I learned of their struggle, and I supported, and I was vocal about it. Somehow the assistant principal always had a good excuse to get into my classroom, come in, because she must have thought I was fomenting an insurrection in the mobile. But I was teaching my classes. One day, there was an in-service. There were no children at school, and the teachers were mulling around the office, and somehow the head of the union, who was at that time a pet of the principal and an ex-Marine, he and I got into this very violent argument about bilingual education. He was very much against it. And so then he was getting so close to me, and I made a huge mistake, and I got scared, and I slapped him in the face. At that moment, he closed his fist and punched me in the face, and I think I knocked out for a few seconds. And then after that, I was rushed to the emergency room. When I got back to school, the principal had a meeting telling the teachers, nobody should say anything what happened today. It is going to be our own secret. And I was fine with that because I was pregnant at the time, and I really didn't want to take on the principal's pet. So I was okay with that. Unbeknownst to me, during the weekend, one of the parents called me from a baby shower that was being held in the neighborhood, a baby shower that turned into a heated meeting, to call me and say, the parents have just found out about what happened. We will not accept that. We will not accept such a violent person as our children's teacher, and you must come over here right now and we must talk about this. So I did go over to the baby shower turned heated meeting, and the parents started describing how many different times their children had been pushed in the walls, and they were in the mobile units, and they would break walls. He was so violent with the kids, and I do remember that he would have them marching up and down when one of the kids would misbehave. So anyway, the parents said to me, they said, this is war, and you must be at the beginning, at the head of the battle. Not in those days, nor today, do I see the police as somebody, an ally or anything like that. But the parents insisted that I make a charge against him, which I did do. That Monday, the police had arrested him, and he was expelled from the school. So we all calmed down. We thought that was just fine, and things would get back to normal. But Friday afternoon, before the end of the day, the principal called me into his office and told me that I was expelled as well. So, of course, I did tell the parents, and then the parents were amazing. They were just amazing. They organized an alternative school at Casa Slan. They had picket lines every morning at the doors of Kaminsky School. And one of the women in the group, Magda, one of the Chicanas, she had organized a car caravan with a sound system going throughout the neighborhood saying, Huelga, Huelga, no school today. We're going to have class at Kaminsky, at Casa Slan. So, and then the parents, the mothers, they were all the mothers. It wasn't the fathers. They were working, And then they were being intimidated. The gym teacher who spoke Spanish, he was taking pictures of them, insinuating that he was going to take their pictures to immigration. And then the husbands were not so happy with their wives being so involved every day, not at home, doing their usual chores. And so the women were very brave and very strong, and they kept up this struggle, and then demanding that I come back to the school. But at any rate, at a certain point in time, we had a meeting, and we decided, it's better that we stop this struggle right now when it's still strong, rather than letting it peter out. And although we didn't win that battle, the mothers of the school did eventually get a new addition to the school. I use that as an example of why I feel so fortunate to have met these people, have lived with them, had worked with them, and seen los de abajo, people who just wanted to struggle for a better life for their families and their children, and wanted justice. And I was part of that struggle, and I feel very fortunate. And that's another reason it compels me to continue on today. I'm going to give you one last example. I seem like I'm always getting fired. I was the director of a federally funded program, as I mentioned, at Centro de la Causa. And we taught ESL classes. We taught GED in Spanish and in English. And on the other side of Centro was a program called Basta. It was a program for drug addicts. And I was the one who was teaching the people who had taken drugs, and teaching them GED basically in English. And, we had a staff of 5 people. We were all progressive minded. I was able to hire the people, so we were all kind of like progressive minded. And of course, we thought formal education is very important for our community. But at the same time, we also wanted to concientizar our students, bring them some level of consciousness of what is going on in society. And so we were fortunate. We had a lot of money at that time, and we were able to bring Latin American Mexican films from a film organization in California called Tricontinental Films. And we brought some wonderful films called a Bolivian bilingual film was in Spanish and Quechua called La Sangre del Condor. We brought Lucia, a Cuban film, a wonderful Cuban film, Mexican Frozen Revolution. And we would have the films on Friday night at Centro, and then on Saturday night they would be at the bookstore, Nuestro Continente. And um, we didn't limit our things, our activities just to our students. We would go in the community and promote the programs that we were having. And I thought things were going just great. And then one day, after I had spent 2 grueling days writing a proposal for the federally funded program, the Right to Read program, I was called into the office of the three honchos, heads of the Centro de la Causa, and they told me basically that I was fired. And I said, fired? Why? And then they said, because instead of doing your job, you were in the street putting up posters and leafleting people. And I thought, oh man, they're still settlement workers. The Chicano movement passed over them. At any rate, I got fired. So I told my roommates, who were two women from the book, Isaura and Magda. And next thing I know, there was this huge meeting at Centro de la Causa with my students, other students, other people who worked at the agency, and community members. And again, it was a thing of like, hey, you can't just fire a teacher. You got to have reason. She's a great teacher, blah, 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 blah. The community was again. And I, it's not about me, although of course it was about me. And I was like, and that was my first experience, but that was earlier than when I first started getting involved. And it was just amazing how people wouldn't take no for anything. There was so much struggle in those days. Any issue that occurred, any injustice, it seems like there was a committee for it. And this was right there in my own backyard. And that night, um, Magda and Isaura, Chicanas of 18th Street, we lived together across the street from Centro, which we called Rasa Towers. And that night, I got my job back. And that night, the head honcho who had fired me, he sent bouquet of flowers, chocolates, and champagne, and the Chicanas and I, we kind of celebrated. And it's for those reasons that I saw um, so much will, so much strength, so much desire for a good society, a fair society, a new world order, as you could say, that it has kept me going all these years. And I would say basically that's why I participated in the book. That's why Maria and I and the other Chicanas are so close, because social justice is such an important part of our lives. And that's my story.
Thanks, Laura. I really enjoyed hearing that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat anytime. Laura, you're getting a lot of people telling you hello in the chat, so some fans out there. Maria, I hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I want to start in my conversation talking about women and how women leadership has developed, and I see it more so now than when I was growing up, in terms of having the respect and the support of men in the struggle. And I'm going to come out with a quote from one of the women in the book, which is Cristina Vital. And she writes, until sexism is eradicated, women will always feel like they have to work harder to prove their worth. And the reason I say that is I'm younger than Laura, and I started my activism in school at Harrison High School, which is now Maria Sacedo Magnet School. And I'll talk a little bit about Maria. And I lived in a wonderful time as the civil rights movement had just started. Vietnam War was in full bloom, if you want to say. I mean, people were protesting that. And then we had the Chicano movement, which had a lot of influence and helped build my own leadership and understanding of racism, fighting for justice, equality, the importance of education. And how it started is in school with the help of an organization. I always give them credit because they deserve the credit. Was OLAS, Organization of Latin American Students. Be it that they were basically men that were coming and they built this organization, if I understand, at Luke College way back then. And so they came to our school and started talking about the importance of education and going to colleges. And that was the fight even in the Southwest. Many of our youth were not attending colleges. They weren't given that choice of attending colleges and university, going into higher education. So that piqued my interest, and also about identity. One of the things growing up as a young person, you're always questioning, well, who am I? You know, what am I? Where do I fit in society? And the identity question was, for me, was also, it was about gender, and it was about, yes, who am I? My parents are from Mexico, so I'm Mexicana, but I've never lived in Mexico. So I always question, what does that mean to be Mexicana? Yes, you have Mexican food, you hear the Mexican music. I have a father who was somewhat of a macho. So there was always struggle of what I can do, I couldn't do as a young woman. So those two issues of identity and gender were also an important part in my life. So from high school, there was a struggle to get a new high school built in Pilsen. And the reason for that is Harrison was the school closest to Pilsen. And if you know some of the history of Pilsen, we had a lot of gangs. I mean, we still have gangs in Pilsen, but not as many as before. And also in Little Village, where Harrison is close to, you're talking about kids coming from Pilsen from one gang and coming into the borders of another gang. So that was not a good situation because there was a lot of gang wars, and it disrupted the school, and it disrupted the learning process for young people, for young men, for young women. So we developed these marches when we found out that yes, we need a new high school, but the Board of Education, Chicago Board of Education, was taking their sweet time and coming on and responding to this call. So in high school, we gathered as many students. I was part of some of the marches all the way to the Board of Education, a couple of them, but the one that kind of broke for us is that a couple of our students at Harrison, including my future husband to be Hector, took over Frobo, which was a freshman center. And basically they took over it, they locked themselves in, they boarded the building, and they wouldn't come out. And another friend, Cookie, was also part of that struggle. Well, I had a lot of issues in school, so I didn't make it to the actual takeover. I made it after that. And I saw two of the organizers, adult organizers that work with us a lot, were there to support the students. And if it wasn't for them, and if it wasn't for the community being outside of the building, the police were ready to beat up these young people. They call it the Frobo riot. And why? You know, all we're talking is about, we want education. We need a place that was pertinent to the needs of a neighborhood. So that's, again, that was my first kind of foot into the struggle. Then from there, I had a good friend, Maria Saucedo, a very powerful woman. There's a lot of history of Maria that if somebody takes a walk to where Casaslan used to be, you'll see her picture up there. Maria Sacedo was a teacher, an activist, leader at her university, Northeastern University. And she provided also a lot of leadership for us. And Maria, I met up with her because our parents knew each other, and we kind of lost track of each other when I moved into Pilsen. So we discovered each other. She was working with the Farm Workers Union, boycotting, going out to get support, the boycott. And as we got together, again, we found that we had a lot in common, and we shared a lot of the ideas behind how do we struggle as women. Then a big part of that came after learning and understanding about labor, campesinos, and the immigration issue. This is what I learned out of the Farm Workers Union boycott. And we got together in, again, through OLAS, but more so in terms of theater. When I introduced her, some of the people that worked in OLAS, and one of the guys, Chelsea Negrete, started a theater group. And they did some of the theater based on Teatro Campesino, which was a theater group that very much advocated for the farm workers. And they came to Chicago. We saw their play. We loved their plays. But eventually, we felt, well, okay, this is about the campesino, but it was also about identity. So some of the plays we can relate to, some of the other plays we could not relate to. And the fact that they didn't have a lot of roles for women, we also questioned. So we started our own theater group. Maria, some of the members of Harrison High School, again, my husband-to-be, we started our own theater called Compañía Trucha. And the roles and the plays that we wrote our own plays based on the needs of our community, whether it was around immigration, women in struggles for equality in jobs. The other issue we did, we wrote a play about a Mexicano man, immigrant, that worked in the store called Cardenas grocery store. And what happened to this man is he's working, his fingers cut off because he put his hands in the chorizo machine. And we found out that it was a big deal. They took this poor man and just threw him in the hospital, didn't want to pay any wages, didn't want to help him pay the hospital bills. And for us, that was injustice. That was injustice. We couldn't have this man just thrown out like that just because store owner thinks he's not responsible for it. So we started our own little play because this man Cardenas had his own show on the Spanish TV station, which was one of the first. At that time, I think there was only one TV station. And he had his own show, Así es mi tierra. That was the name of the show he did. And it was a cultural show. And so we use that word, Así es mi tierra, we call it Así es mi mierda. You want me to translate that? That's my shit. In other words, that's what our play was about. And we criticized him for what he was doing. So that was the beginning of really taking on the issues that were important to the community. Okay, so I'm going to go from there to what Laura had already mentioned. St. Luke's. St. Luke's Hospital was another big part of Compañía Trucha's activism, because even though we were teatro and we wrote our own skits, we had built consciousness through the work we did, through the people we performed for. Plus, the thing about being in teatro that time, there were so many theaters at that time. We're talking in the 70s. So many theaters from all over the United States, Latin America, Cuba, where we learned from each other. We learned about our issues. So it was international. We started looking at the whole international picture of what it meant to be Mexicano, Latino America, and we discovered we have the same issues. We have the same oppression, and the fight was the same for us. So when we got involved, and again, we started at Casaslan, many of us started at Casaslan. It was like the mecca for organizing and activism. And because that began with the Chicano movement and the Chicago conference in Denver, it just raised a lot of consciousness among young people. So we all were drawn to Casaslan. And I know for me, I basically grew up there and was very active in Casaslan and working there with youth and what have you. But I want to go back into why St. Luke's Rush Presbyterian Hospital was important. There was a woman who came to talk to us, Magdalena Garcia. And Magdalena was fired from St. Luke's for complaining about taking her from her job being a lab technician into translating all the time for patients. So she was doing two jobs and getting paid for one, and feeling that it was so unfair for her mainly to be one person where so many people needed help. And she pushed to hire translators. At that time, there is translators now. If you go to many hospitals, they have their own translators. That time, we didn't have Spanish-speaking translators or any kind of other language translators. So Magdalena came out with a story, and our theater group, among other leaders of Casaslan and Apo, worked together to strategize. And finally, what we decided to do was to have again, a sit-in. A sit-in took over the building. Of course, police arrested 43, including Hector Gamboa, María Saucedo, and Victoria, which is the other woman in the book. They were taken and again put into the in jail, and they met some wonderful women who said, "Yeah, we're with you, we support you." And that they started singing songs. Unfortunately, I couldn't be part of it. I was pregnant with, I think it was my first daughter, and I manned the phones to make sure we had money to take all these people out of jail. Well, to make a long story short, along the way, we spent days, nights talking and developing strategies. How are we going to get these 43 people found innocent for trespassing? Well, anyways, so the group, the 43, with 4 representatives of the group, decided that everyone was going to represent themselves in their tribes. And successfully, mind you, they dropped the trespassing case. And what it took was strategizing with the community, bringing the community every day to courts, pushing the issue through our theater to get community support as well, getting funding, getting people to go there actually in court and show we were there in strength. That was just an interesting time for us, because we saw the power that theater can have in a community and internationally. We went from Chicago through the Midwest. We attended a large conference in Mexico City. We were able to communicate with all these people who are out there struggling, even the people who, I don't remember the name that they used to use, the sellers who used to sell in the streets in Mexico City. They developed their own theater to talk about their own issues. So it's just a wonderful time to live in and see that we all had common ground. And through through theater, we were also questioning the roles of women. Why are not enough plays or enough issues about the woman question coming up? So as a theater, we basically took that as a very serious issue. And whenever it was a big struggle, don't get me wrong, we struggled hard. And be it that we studied a lot of Marxist Leninists and Mao, especially Mao, who had the woman question, and we took that seriously. And for me, for example, I was one of the first members to have children, so we had to assign some of our comrades to babysit so I can be part of those meetings. My husband used to take turns also taking care of the children so I can be part of the meeting. And that was the best outcome of, I can say, of feeling really supported and feeling that I was taken seriously. And then we met all these women, and that Laudo said every woman in there has a story, and we all united around some of the issues we're talking about, as well as building the cultural movement, which again, Laura mentions when we talk about the mural movement, music, the creation of teatro. That was our way of bringing, because we didn't have control over TV, radio, what have you. So theater was a way of bringing out the message and getting people to unite around the various issues. Um, it was through also through the creation of the Casa Slan, which was part of the cultural movement, that we had a place where we can sit and talk and organize. And we used to show films from Mexico. We used to show films. One of the wonderful films that came out also with the plight of women was Salt of the Earth. Salt of the Earth, if you ever have a chance to see it, it's a wonderful movie. And that's one of the first movies that showed the strength that women have in making things happen. Anyway, so our fight was for justice, equality. The one specifically at St. Luke's was for equality for healthcare for our community. The issue of the labor of women with Magdalena, and the fact that we had 23 people arrested. The issue is who is our enemy? Who really is our enemy? We became aware of who the enemy was, which was capitalism. So we had come from talking about the national question to becoming people who understand about classes, the working class, the power that people had to make things happen, to make things change. And it was a very revolutionary acts that we did in order for that to happen. We didn't want to work within the system. We wanted to work outside the system. And that's what the Chicano movement did for many of us, kind of brought up the theory. And the undocumented workers also was also a place that we were able to unite with, not just people who grew up here, lived here, but people who came, like my parents, from other countries, and were able to help them understand, again, how to survive, how to fight against the immigration going down our streets and attacking them. So that, again, was one of the things that was important for our community. There was many other issues that happened at Casaslan that I can get into, and also in Pilsen. But Pilsen, I have to say, just kind of opened for young people a way of organizing, a way of building trust, and taking it to further into being really a revolutionary group, much like what's going on now. Now I'm going to talk about now in terms of the women, the leadership out there is wonderful. The Black Lives Movement that has influence, not just women, but the whole community, the whole world. And I have to say, we're living in great time because these women have very much taken from what year was this? They taken it from 2013 to currently and made this movement grow. So that's why I felt that I wanted to basically talk about the women issue because it's still current now. I think we need to support the leadership again. I have many, including my daughters, who I have great respect. As a strong woman, I built strong women. Laura, a lot of these women became role models for my own daughters. I had two daughters. Uh, and I have to say, they took the baton and ran with it. One of my daughters, Valentina, works at Northeastern University and is head of the Pedroso Center. She is the one who advocates for people to understand and hear what's going on in the world and in the United States and in the community. We did recently. We did a webinar with her help um, around Latin America, which is also now currently one of the issues that is impacting not just Latin America, but it's impacting now. That is why we became part of CESLA, as Laura mentioned to you. And we feel that we were trying to do something, especially before the election, but we get ignored. We get ignored by the Democratic Party, we get ignored by the Republican. So we want to make changes in seeing that Latin America should be a priority for all, especially hearing today in a show called Democracy Now, where they talked about what's going on in Latin America with the hurricane. It's devastating for people in Latin America. They're being hit in Honduras, they're being hit in Guatemala, they're being hit in Colombia. And this is all part of the changes in the weather. And we have to take this serious. It's impacting us, but it's also impacting the world, the climate change. And this is a real struggle, not just for us who are surviving now, but for our future of our children. We have to unite. That is one of the things that I learned in the many struggles that I've been to. It's not enough to work within the system. I mean, politicians, we need to have politicians, but we need to make them accountable. We need to understand the attacks on people of color, the undocumented workers, and the working class. We have to unite around all these issues. We need to know our enemy, which is capital imperialism. We need to know it and understand it. And we need to develop strategies where we can become revolutionary again and really struggle to make the changes we need. And I have high hopes that after this pandemic, that I think we will see a lot more struggle going on. And as Mexican, Latino, Chicano, I think again, I think these issues are going to bring us together and unite us on a bigger picture. And that's basically what I want to say. I also want to give kudos to other women that were also, for me, are powerful women. Esther Lopez, who served on the executive board of the United Food and Commercial Workers International. That's another example. Carolina Gaete, who right now is the director of Blacks Together. It's a wonderful organization working in the African American community, and they are doing a tremendous job there. And Fawn Pochel, which is in Chi Nation. This is a woman who's indigenous and is working with the indigenous youth. There are tremendous amount of women, and I think we need to just give them that respect and that support. And that's it. I want to stop there.
Wow, thank you, Maria. There were so many times during your talk I just wanted to snap in agreement and solidarity. That was amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories with us. I'm was on the verge of tears several times. It was really great. I want to encourage people, don't be shy, put questions in the chat. But first, I have a question, if you guys don't mind. And I think you kind of answered a little bit of this, Maria. But I was wondering what advice you have for young people who are interested in getting involved in organizing, and also young people who are new to Pilsen, who may not know a lot of this really important history, how they should go about getting involved, how they should go about learning more.
Well, I think, again, you're seeing a movement. I hate the fact we're in a pandemic. I hate the fact because there's so much to do, but we're also putting our kids in danger right now, being infected. But I think understanding, reading, as I'm glad you're reading our book. I think that's one thing that's great about this time, that we can stay home and read. And I think the fact when you see things happening, go find out yourself, uh, listen, and try to understand. And I think once you're able to do that, then there's going to be somehow something is going to call your attention, because there's so many issues out there to work on. And I think the fact is we can just begin in that. And I'm glad you have the library, because I think we all need a place where we can come and meet other people who think like us. And then that way you can have these discussions. And from there you can build what you think is important. Um, that's how I see things. In high school, well, again, in high school, I don't know if you're talking about kids in college or high school, whatever. Uh, Even my own grandkids, I have 5 girls. I have to give them a lot of kudos. My 5 granddaughters, 2 of them are in college, UIC. The other one is just starting her college. She was supposed to be in Georgia, but she's at home doing her work. But anyways, both of them got involved also. One is an Asada's daughter. The other one, I can't remember the organization. So just starting even in that, something small that you like, that you feel good about. And then from there, as you start listening, as you start looking at things more, and it'll take you to another step. That's the only thing I can think of at this point. Again, we're in a pandemic. What can we do other than, if you provide a space, people can gather and start talking. We can be invited. We can talk with them, what have you.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. Specifically, the coalition that I mentioned earlier, the coalition to stop the Pilsen landmark, tomorrow, Wednesday at 7 p.m., we're having a community forum, bilingual Spanish, English, about what it's all about and what we're going to do about it. And so I think technology is not my forte. I think that I can give the link to you, and people can later on look it up if you're interested in, just listening and hearing what it's all about, specifically that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you send me the link, Laura, I'll be sure to tweet it out and put it on our social media for the bookstore, so anyone who's interested, if you can't find it directly, you can find it there, for sure.
Can I say something too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another example. I forgot about it. But my daughter at the not my daughter, but at the Pedroso Center this month, they're concentrating Indigenous Month. So if you go to their website, the Pedroso Center, you will see a calendar of discussions around Indigenous communities. So I can also suggest that.
Oh, great. That's great. Thank you. I think we only have time for one more question, which makes me sad, but that just means that when the pandemic is over, you'll have to come if you want to speak again at the bookstore. I know a lot of people would love to hear you talk more. But for now, our last question would be, it sounds like in the 60s and 70s, at the height of the organizing that is in this book, a lot of things converge to make a lot of organizing possible. And it kind of feels like, and Maria, you talked about this a little bit, we're in that kind of moment again. How do you see the challenges? Where are they similar from the 70s and now, and where do they differ? And what do you think we can learn from the past moving forward?
I can say one thing. One thing I think is really wonderful, because I've seen a lot of Latino youth, Mexican, Chicano, Puerto Rican, other Latin Americans. I've seen them joining the Black Lives Movement, and that has given me so much pride, so much happiness, because I think the divide, and young white youth too, I think because the divide has merged more so than in the past, and so that makes me very, very hopeful. And so that would be my to me what I noticed more than anything, because it wasn't like that before.
No, it was, Laura. It was, and I think you're right. You're correct about that in the Black Lives Matter, because I remember working with all kinds of people, whether they were Anglo, whether they were Latino, African American. We were all in the same boat in terms of trying to unite on certain issues, on some things around labor, especially on labor. So yeah, I think there was some unity there too, but I see more, and I have a lot of, I have a lot of hope after the pandemic, and not on our politicians. I want to say this: do not put your hope on the politicians. It's still going to be a battle of people demanding their rights and equality, and again, saving our planet. That, I think, that's going to be important.
So you would say organizing in the community is more important than ever?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Educating people.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
as far as the politicians, Black and Latino youth worked very, very hard. Not for Biden, to get Trump out. That's what it was all about. It was not for Biden. And I hope that we will continue to struggle, and people realize that it's not the ballot box that is the way to go, and that it's our unity and our struggle that's going to be what's going to make the difference.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I agree with you there for sure. Thank you both for joining me tonight. We'll post the links Laura and Maria talked about on the social media for the bookstore, and both of these videos, the first one and then it got cut off, and the second one will be on our YouTube channel later, and we'll share those links too, and we encourage you to share them out. Again, thanks for joining us. I encourage you to pick up the book Chicanas of 18th Street. It's the best book I've read in a very long time, very formative for me, and it spurred this whole discussion, the first of many, I hope. And with that, I say good night.
Buenas noches.